Hello, everyone. My name is Tae Suk Son, and I'm the product manager for the SAP HANA Cloud. And today's topic is the hybrid scenario. So let's go into the agenda for what we will be discussing today. So we'll go over the basic introduction and overview of why enterprises are considering hybrid scenarios and how SAP Cloud, HANA Cloud can support those customers. And in detail, we'll look at how to connect for these hybrid scenarios in terms of federation and replication, and how to set up these connectivity between the on-premise side and the SAP HANA Cloud side. And also, finally, we'll discuss how to set up the details for setting up the replication and also the federation. And lastly, my colleague Seungjoon Lee will show you a demo of how all of it is done in detail. So a lot of enterprises are considering moving into the cloud. And as they have already invested a lot in their hybrid, in their on-premise landscape, hybrid scenario is an important scenario for much of the enterprises today. As they are trying to invest more into the cloud, they have to utilize the existing landscape of their on-premise system. And we have looked into some of the reasons why SAP HANA Cloud is the right solution for these hybrid scenarios. The first reason that customers consider the SAP HANA Cloud is the bimodal IT strategy. It keeps the mission critical systems on premise while having a more competitive edge utilizing the most up-to-date technologies using SAP HANA Cloud. Also, business integrity is key. So it ensures that keeping the critical business data in their on-premise system, keeping it safe from outside intruders, and only replicating or allow federation of data that is minimally needed to analyze or run business in the cloud. Also, you can utilize the elasticity of the SAP HANA Cloud as you can run up HANA Cloud whenever you need and add additional resources to the SAP HANA Cloud landscape. Also, agile decision-making based on trusted live data. So it is very critical for businesses to make sure that they make the right decision at the right time. So having live data in their applications or analysis is very important. So to allow real-time replication or real-time federation into their on-premise system is very important. The last reason that customers consider SAP HANA Cloud is combining the big data scenarios. So a lot of data are generated within the on-premise, but also a lot of data come from other sources that can be big. And using the Cloud Object Store or the HANA Data Lake, customers can utilize these big data and integrate them into the hybrid scenario. So to look into more detail, we have identified 3 scenarios why SAP HANA Cloud is important for the customers. The first scenario is utilizing the SAP HANA Cloud as a single access layer to all external data outside their company. So they can connect to other cloud sources or other multi-cloud databases or IoT application data or other forms of data that is very important for the enterprises. And it's a very easy initial setup to set up the SAP HANA Cloud, and they can utilize the real-time data and no data movement or replication is needed because they're using the SAP HANA Cloud as a federation into these multiple remote sources. So it allows a low TCO to set up this as a gateway to all data. The second scenario is to store these big data and manage data in the SAP HANA Cloud environment. So they can integrate the data into the SAP HANA Cloud, into the the relational data lake, or the HANA instance in memory. And it's very scalable and centralized data source. And a lot of applications can connect to these sources from either on-prem or from the cloud. And it is a very secure environment that they can utilize. The third scenario that we would like to emphasize is expanding the on-premise landscape into the cloud. So for customers who already have invested in the on-premise system, such as S/4HANA or existing SAP HANA instances or any other NEDB as a backend system, can easily extend these systems into SAP HANA Cloud by using real-time replication to replicate data from their on-premise system into the SAP HANA Cloud. So the SAP HANA Cloud can cover their peak workloads and expand their workload into the cloud much easily and scale into the cloud. Also, they can federate the queries from the SAP HANA Cloud into their on-premise and utilize the cloud data that the SAP HANA Cloud offers as well. And this type of federation can be bidirectional, where they can connect from the cloud to the on-prem, or the opposite, where they can connect from the on-prem into the cloud as well. So based on these three scenarios, customers can extend their on-premise system into a hybrid scenario landscape. Based on that, we will look into a more detail of federation and replication. So customers who want to extend their on-premise system into a hybrid landscape can think of two technologies as their basis for these type of hybrid scenarios. One is the federation, where the data stays in their on-premise system or the remote source, and the query is federated into this remote source. The other option is the replication, where the data is being replicated from their on-premise system into the SAP HANA Cloud. And technology-wise, two technologies can be offered for both the federation and replication. So SDA and SDI both offers federation, which have been provided even from the on-premise SAP HANA platforms. And additionally, with the federation, data replication is supported. With SDI, it supports various remote sources where they can replicate from these remote sources into the SAP HANA Cloud, and some sources can be replicated in real time. Recently, SDA offers a remote table replication feature, where it is using a native HANA replication technology, which is optimized log-based replication that replicates data from one HANA instance to another SAP HANA Cloud instance. And it is a direct table level replication that is being supported. And when we look into the more detail of the replication, there's two technologies that is allowed. One is the SDA, and the other one is SDI. And SDI have been provided for a long time, but SDA using the remote table replication is a new technology that we are offering today with SAP HANA Cloud. And it is using the same SQL interfaces, so that both interfaces are allowed to connect to using SDA or either the SDI, but SDA-based RTR is more HANA native, where the the replication is more optimized between the HANA instances, and it offers a real-time replication. The other aspect is the federation or the data virtualization. So with SAP HANA Cloud, we offer a new functionality called Fabric Virtual Table. So Fabric Virtual Table is federating your queries into the remote source, where the data still resides in your remote source. But to optimize the data transfer, we have additionally providing technologies where the data can be cached. So it can be a snapshot of the data that the query is offering, or it can be a replica of the table. And the replica can be set up using the RTR technology in real time. So the replication itself is done in real time. So to connect to between the SAP HANA Cloud and the on-premise system, we offer, there are multiple types of connectivity that are being supported. So as of now, the on-premise platform, SAP HANA platform can connect to the SAP HANA Cloud instance through ODBC. And as it's inside the firewall, it can just connect to the SAP HANA Cloud using SSL connection into the HANA Cloud. But for the RTR, the remote table replication technology, the SAP Cloud Connector is required to make a virtual tunnel between the cloud environment and the on-premise environment, where the ODBC connection can be bi-directional. So once the SEC is set up, then you can set up SDA from the HANA on-premise to the SAP HANA Cloud, and vice versa, from HANA Cloud to your on-premise system as well. So SCC is a critical component that the RTR technology requires. So let's go into the detail of how we can set up the SCC between the on-premise and the SAP HANA Cloud environment. The first thing that we need to do for setting this up is that you would need to download and install the Cloud Connector on your on-premise system, which is behind your firewall. And you would create a mapping into your on-premise SAP HANA system and register this information into SCC. And you're selecting the TCP SSL for the connection protocol between the Cloud Connector and SAP HANA and the HANA Cloud as well. And while you're creating this mapping, you would create a virtual address where you are creating a virtual host name and a virtual port number that will be used by the SAP HANA Cloud platform. And using that information will be mapped into the local SAP HANA platform based on this mapping. And once this mapping is configured and registered, it will be available to be used in the SAP Cloud platform and finally be used by the HANA Cloud. Once the SCC mapping has been set up, when you're provisioning the SAP HANA Cloud, there is a new option, which is the fourth step that is needed during the provisioning of the HANA Cloud. And that is to allow the cloud database to connect to your local HANA system through SAP Cloud Connector. And once you enable this, the HANA Cloud can utilize the SCC as a virtual tunnel into the on-premise system using the mapping information that was provided in the previous step. And we will go through the demo by Seungjoon as well. The last step, once the SCC has been set up with the virtual address, the virtual host name and port, in the SAP HANA Cloud, we will create a remote source using the SDA as like a previous HANA platform on-premise instance. The only difference is that we would need the additional property settings in step 3 and 4, where it uses the SOX proxy. So the SOX proxy is the connectivity that allow the SAP HANA Cloud to utilize the SCC to connect to the on-premise system. So this is the setting that is required. And also, if you set up a location for the SEC, then optionally, you would need to additionally set up the SEC location ID to allow to connect to the right location when you're creating the remote source. So once the connectivity is set up using SEC between your on-premise system and the SAP HANA Cloud, we can now set up the federation or replication based on your business needs. First, let's go over how you can set up a virtual table using the SDA. So in SAP HANA Cloud, you can create a virtual table like you have done in the on-premise HANA instance as well. But additionally, in addition to the virtual table, you can create a fabric virtual table, meaning that you can create a cache of the table, or you can create a replica of a table. So cache is here in the SQL syntax is called a snapshot. So you can create a snapshot and you can manually refresh the snapshot at a desired interval or programmed to be refreshed whenever needed. In addition to the snapshot, you can create a replica. So replica will utilize the replication technology in real time, and it will replicate the data into a replica table. But keep in mind that this replica table still sits behind the virtual table. So the query that you're running is still looks like a federated query where you're doing a select statement on a virtual table, but instead of sending this SQL statement to the remote source, it will utilize either the cache or the replica that sits behind the virtual table. So it is actually retrieving the data much faster. And while the cache is a snapshot of a certain time, the replica can be set up to be a real time. And you can set this replica to or cache to utilize the NSE technology. So instead of caching or replicating all the data into memory, you can use the NSE and save this to disk. In addition to the virtual tables, or you can utilize the replication. So the replication is actually sitting next to the virtual table, so and populating this physical table. So using the RTR technology, it will populate the data into a physical local table within the SAP HANA Cloud, and all the queries need to be directed to this physical local table. So instead of using a virtual table, you would be actually using a physical table. In addition to replicating or federating data between your on-premise and the SAP HANA Cloud system, you can also federate data into other third-party systems as well. And at this moment, we're allowing Athena or Google BigQuery, and you can federate the data from the SAP HANA Cloud into these two systems. And also, we are in the roadmap planning to extend as well. And also, for big data integration scenarios, we allow loading data from Microsoft Azure Blob Storage or the Amazon S3 storage as well, and also planning to expand on the support for these type of cloud object store as well. And currently, it allows loading data from these cloud storage into the data lake, and recently into SAP HANA Cloud as well. So based on that, now I will hand over to Seungjoon, who will go over a brief demo of what I have introduced today. So Seungjoon.
Thank you, Tae Suk. Hi, my name is Seungjoon Lee. I am a product manager for SAP HANA especially for SAP HANA Smart Data Access and table replication. So from now on, let me show you the demo.
In this demo, let me show you how to use the remote table replication between two SAP HANA Cloud instances. So this is my uh, demo instance, demo-HANA. This will be the target. And I have another HANA Cloud instance, my HANA Cloud trial. So it's trial-HANA. So in it will be the source, and in this trial instance, I have a TPCH table, and among these tables, I will use the customer table to replicate. So let me show you the customer table. So as you can see, it contains data, and if I check the size, it contains 150,000 rows. So I will replicate this table from this source system, source instance, HANA Cloud Trial, and then replicate to the my demo-HANA instance. So the first thing I will do is creating a remote source to the source system, source instance. So um, here I named it remote underscore lab, and I will use the HANA ODBC adapter. And then the endpoint should be coming from the trial instance. So let me quickly show you. Here you can easily find the endpoint. So I used it. And then um, I need to uh, enter the certificate here to access the another HANA Cloud instance. So as described in our help documentation, as you can see, you can use this command to download SSL certificate signed by DigiCert. So let me quickly show you how to do this. So if I go to the terminal, then I use this command. Yeah, it will easily and quickly download the file. So let me check this. Then you can simply use this certificate for creating a remote source. So let me go back. So I use that certificate, but as described in the help documentation, it should be a single line. And also I used credential type password using my dbadmin of trial instance and password. So let me run this statement. Okay, so let me go to the remote sources. Yes, as you can see, the remote source remote underscore rep is successfully created. And if I go to the remote source, if I check the TPCH schema and search, yes, I can see the TPCH tables including customer. So let me go back to the console, and now let me create a virtual table on that customer table. I named this virtual table as a v underscore customer, and I'm using the demo schema. So to replicate the data, I need to create a virtual table first. So let me run this statement. So customer table is created, and if I go to the table, yeah, I can see v underscore customer. So if I run this select statement, as I showed in the source system, it shows the data and on the fly, and then also it shows the row numbers. So what I'll do next is create a replica table to replicate. So I use this statement like v underscore customer and create a replica table r underscore customer. So let me run this statement. So it is created here. And then if obviously if I run this query, it is empty table, so nothing is shown here. So what I'll do next is create a remote subscription. So I named it sub, SUB, uh, on demo schema virtual table, and target table is r underscore customer table. So I run this statement. So it creates a remote subscription. It's done. So if I go to remote subscription, I can see it is created. So what I'll do next is activate the replication. So once I um, execute this statement, it starts to replicate data real time. And then um, if I run this query again, yeah, now I can see all data is replicated, and if I check the row numbers, yes, all data is successfully replicated very quickly. So this is basic steps for using remote table replication, and if I want, I can use this statement to deactivate, or I can drop the replication if I want. And also there is some monitoring view. So if you are interested in, you can find the HANA Cloud Administration Guide. There is replicating tables from remote sources, and there is a system views for monitoring remote table replication. So there are some monitoring views. Let me quickly show you one of them. So this is m underscore remote underscore table replicas. So if I run this query, as you can see, it shows the replication what I just did. So what is the remote source and schema table, and also what is the source and current. You can also check the replication status. It is enabled, and last enabled time and last disabled time, and so on. So this is all about the remote table replication between SAP HANA Cloud instances. From now on, let me show you how to do this with a hybrid scenario. Everything is basically the same, but in order to create a remote source to on-premise HANA, um, you need to enable SAP Cloud Connector with SAP HANA Cloud. For this, you can either do this during the provisioning, creating an instance, or in my case, since I already created an instance, I can modify the existing configuration. So as you can see, there is a option to enable the Cloud Connector. Since I already enabled it, I will not do this. Just cancel it here. So by doing this, you can allow SAP Cloud Connector to access this SAP HANA Cloud instance. So what I'll do next is obviously configuring SAP Cloud Connector. So let me go to my Cloud Connector here. So let me log in. So um, since I'm using the AWS in Frankfurt, so I'll choose this. For the sub account, uh, I can find this in my HANA trial sub account. So here I can copy this sub account ID and then use it here. Display name is, I will just demo here, and then login email is my sub account email, and password. Plus, you need to add the SCP MFA 6-digit code here. So let me add the 6-digit code. And location ID is, let me just put demo here. And then save it. So by doing this, I can map this SAP Cloud Connector to my SAP HANA Cloud trial instance. So here, more precisely, not cloud trial instance, but the sub account. So um, as you can see, it is connected successfully. And what I'll do next is go to Cloud to on-premise, and I will add my on-premise HANA here. So let me click Add, and I will add the SAP HANA. And next, protocol is TCP, and then since my internal HANA host name is like this, and I will use my port. And then to expose this internal host to the public network, I should specify the virtual host and virtual port. So instead of using the actual host name, let me rename the first part like this, and I use the same port for this connection. So next, and finish it. So now this my internal SAP HANA host name is mapped to virtual host, and um, the result is not unchecked, but if I check it, so as you can see now SCC, SAP Cloud Connector can um, reach to my on-premise HANA. So this is all about the SAP Cloud Connector setting. And then let me go back to my HANA Cloud trial. And what I'll do next is create a remote source to that on-premise. In this case, um, I named this as on-premise and using the same HANA ODBC and configuration. Here, I will use the virtual host I just created, and um, for on-premise connection to use, I need to specify the SOX proxy true and location ID. As you can see, as you already saw, I used the demo, and then credential type is password and system and password. So by running this statement, I can um, create a remote source to my on-premise HANA from my HANA Cloud trial instance. So after that, the remote table replication can be possible in the same way.
All right, that's all about the demo. With that, let me hand over to Tae Suk for wrapping up.
Thank you, Seungjoon. That was a great demo. Okay, so for more information regarding the hybrid scenario or the SAP HANA Cloud, we have additional related TechEd sessions for you that is available for you. So we have the general introduction of the SAP HANA Cloud, where you can start your cloud transition now, and also extending your on-premise landscape into the cloud with hybrid deployments. And additionally, we have the roadmap for the HANA Cloud as well. And to continue your learning experience for the TechEd in 2020, we have provided some of the links to activate your free access to the SAP Learning Hub or even deepen and validate your solution skills. And you can subscribe to the SAP Learning Hub as well. And I would like to conclude today's session. I hope it was very informative for the customers who are considering to extend their on-premise landscape and into a hybrid scenario using the SAP HANA Cloud. We have introduced the federation technology and the replication technology. And in terms of the replication, we have added a new functionality called remote table replication. And this would be available as part of the latest release of the SAP HANA Cloud. And you can utilize this technology to replicate from your on-premise system to the SAP HANA Cloud using the SAP Cloud Connector. So I think using this technology would help a lot of customers to analyze their data in real time and make rapid decisions utilizing both the on-premise system and the cloud landscape. So if you have any further questions regarding the topic today, you can refer to the information in this slide and contact either myself or Seungjoon Lee regarding the details of how to set up the hybrid landscape using SDI or SDA for federation or replication. So thank you all for attending today's lecture. Goodbye.